I'm not sure how much better the Siakam deal could look from their perspective. I think that, if you listen to part 1 of this episode, you heard us talk about the value of connectivity and stars being interactive. And I think that Halliburton and Siakam are showing that they're willing to play off one another. More so Siakam playing off of Halliburton when they play together, which is nice. I think that a concern of the Siakam trade, especially from someone like XJ's perspective, is like Halliburton having the ball less isn't a good thing. Like he's one of the best offensive players in the league. You don't want to do something that will take the ball out of his hands. But at least in the Pacers games that I've watched, the ball is in his hands just as much. It's just he's finding a better player in Siakam in these advantageous positions, and Siakam is showing a willingness to play off of Halliburton and elevate the team. And then also, this is more to the point, I think, you follow someone like Kalen Cooper on Twitter, who's amazing Pacers. I don't even know. What do we call ourselves? Content creator, so lame. We're in our 30s.
Analyst? I think she's an analyst.
Yeah, analyst. That's a great word. There you go. See, I'm terrible with words. Actually, she's great with words.
Not true.
Pacers analyst. She's wonderful. It's one of my favorite follows. Just everything she says is just, I just learn every single time she posts something. And something she's highlighted a bunch is just how Siakam has just overhauled the defense. Like, they're not a good defense, make no mistake about it, but Siakam stands out as someone who is making multiple efforts. He's, on the perimeter, he's protecting at the rim. If I was a Pacers fan and I had any concerns that Siakam was going to come in here, try to be a star worthy of what they gave up for him, take possessions from Halliburton, and then kind of mail it in a defense, he's sort of just done the opposite. And that's, to me, as good as it could have been. Maybe they'll never win a championship with these two as their two best players, but guess what? They made the swing. The trade is already made. Now, if you're a Pacers fan, you're rooting for the results to be as optimal as possible. And the early returns to me are Siakam is willing to play off Halliburton and he's willing to play defense. Two very, very important things for the next few years for this team.
I think you're totally right about that as far as the willingness to kind of play that role. I think that was potentially a question. It seems like Siakam's willing to do that. I want to put out there, I'm biased here. I'm just biased here. So I want to acknowledge that and also want to share with the audience that, we're all biased. It's just about being able to, to be aware of that bias. And I am, and I don't really like Siakam as a player. I think he is comparable to a Julius Randle type of player, and I just don't like the style. But he's been less of that in Indiana so far, and so hopefully he's able to maintain that. And it could be in some cases, maybe he was a little bit checked out in Toronto, knew he wasn't going to be there long term, knew that they weren't going to sign him long term, knew his days were numbered, and just was kind of like, I'm going to get mine here. So, you guys figure out whatever you got to figure out, because this is not a team. Clearly, if I'm on my way out and it, and you're not going to pay me, then, there could be a lot of that was going on that affected how Siakam played in Toronto. So I want to put that out there. And he's clearly not doing that in Indiana. You're totally right, Geoff. He is making a ton of defensive effort. I just think that his shooting is going to limit how good they're going to be offensively. And I think to the point I was making in, the first part of our podcast, in terms of, if you look at all teams 5-man lineup. So this is 5-man lineup. So it's not just any random combination of three players. This is 5-man lineup. So there aren't 5-man lineups. There's not a ton of possessions. But if you look at all 5-man lineups in the entire NBA, and we look at over 200 possessions played together, the second best lineup to the Philadelphia Sixers with Maxey, Melton, Harris, Batum, and Embiid is Halliburton, Buddy Hield, Bruce Brown, Obi Toppin, and Miles Turner at a plus 20.5. A ridiculous 136 points per 0.4 per 100 possessions. And the defense was not good, but not the worst in the league. 115.9 points per possessions given up, per 100 possessions given up. So I think that this team may be better in some ways with Siakam, or definitely will be better in some ways with Siakam. And we've seen, his willingness to lock in on the defensive end, and his defensive versatility is something like they've not had clearly. But at the same time, I don't know that they're going to be better on balance with him than they would have been without him, and in the ways that they were plugging in those holes and being able to score at such a high rate. To me, I think if you're the best offense in the league and like a bottom 5 defense in the league, and you're kind of like a little above mediocre as a result, like that's more interesting to me and fun to watch than if you're just like a good offense and not a top 17 defense or something like that. It's just like, whatever. But I think it could be good for them moving forward. We talked about this before in the playoffs. It's really good to have some like other things that you can go to. And I think Siakam does provide that. He's a mid-range monster. He hits those mid-range shots like just like almost DeMar DeRozan like in some ways it seems. But I'm just not excited for it if I'm a Pacers fan, because what's the ceiling for this team now? Like, at least before, you could potentially run anyone out the gym, and they can maybe still do that. But definitely not at the same level, in my opinion, with Siakam, who is bringing down your ability to space the court around Halliburton. So that's really my concern and would be my concern. But again, I'm biased because I'm more prone to the style of play that the Pacers were playing, with one primary creator at the level of a Halliburton in terms of his passing and his shooting, and guys just spaced out all around him with Miles Turner, with Obi Toppin, with Jalen Smith, just guys spaced out from 3 and just creating such an awesome offensive dynamic, and some of the stuff that they were trying in Indiana. So yeah, it could work out for them. This could be better, but I just see they just have a hard cap on their ceiling at this point, in my opinion.
So a couple things. One, I've always believed that Pascal Siakam has more functional gravity than his actual shooting would indicate, because of his willingness to shoot threes off the catch and the position he plays. And just, I don't see him being ignored as someone that his shooting results would dictate that he should be. The second thing that I want to say is that I get your hesitance because Siakam is most comfortable at power forward. So usually it's like, okay, if your power forward isn't a great shooter, well, you already have a center. The 3 guys that Siakam is most commonly sharing the court with in the front court are Jalen Smith, Miles Turner, and Obi Toppin. Like one of those 3 guys. So the Pacers already pretty much only play good shooters at point guard, shooting guard, and small forward. And so Siakam's almost functioning as the team's center from a spacing perspective. Like, I don't think that it's going to hurt the team's offense as much as you do. And look, I mean, it's a small sample size, but you look at how the team's performing when he's on the court. They're not just crushing because the defense has gotten better. I mean, the defense does play better when he's on the court. He has the highest on-court net rating. But if you look at Halliburton's on-court offensive rating, the Pacers are scoring 124.6 points per 100 possessions when Halliburton plays. That dips to 124.3 points per 100 possession when Siakam plays. So I know it's only 9 games, but I don't know. I'm just not seeing what you're seeing in terms of this offense falling off a cliff. And frankly, I know they played over 200 minutes, but just being like, oh, well, this lineup scored 134 points per 100 possessions across, a little bit over 200 minutes. Why should they get this offensive player who could, like, they're not just going to do that across the whole season. Of course, you have to.
No, just to be clear, yeah, I agree with you, but it's not 200 minutes. It's 368 possessions. So it's not. I'm not looking at per minute basis. I'm looking at possession basis. I'm cleaning the glass, by the way. But yes, if you continue, your point is still valid. Go ahead.
That was the end of my point. That was. I believe that Siakam isn't hurting the spacing as much, especially when he's involved in the action, which he plays off of Halliburton plenty. He's a willing screen setter, and I think that he attracts attention that way. And then to the functional gravity standpoint, I have no proof of that, so I know you won't be overly like accepting of it, only to say that in all the years I've watched Siakam, I never see teams that are like, like we'll just leave him alone over there, the way that other guys get ignored. Like I believe that because he's a big and he has the reputation he does, he gets the same defensive attention when he's spacing in the corner or above the break. That not the same, but he gets enough that it's not hurting your offense off the ball.
Yeah, and I think you made that point about Julius Randle as well. Even when he's not shooting particularly well, like teams are not going to just leave him alone. But I mean, we've talked about this, and everyone has talked about this. Really, like in terms of what the Pacers do and how it translates into the playoffs. I think teams are going to treat him differently in the playoffs. Like they're going to be locked in. They're going to be game plan. They're going to say we have to give up something, right? What do we give up with this team? This team can do anything. What do we give up? And it's like, can we live with like someone closing out to a Siakam relatively open three? And maybe that's the best we can do against this team. And if he's going to cash him in at like a 31% clip or something like that, like, you know, that's not going to really be gangbusters for you. So I just think in a playoff environment, maybe over the regular season, they're going to be like, whoa, it's Pascal Siakam. We got to get out there, you know, but like in a playoff environment, when teams are locked in, it's like, this is how we're treating these players. We have to stick to these principles. You know, would I rather have a 40% from three Obi Toppin in that situation? Would I rather have a 47% from three Jalen Smith in that situation? Like,
he's so good, dude.
Yeah, he's maintained this shooting. Like I'm waiting for it to fall off. I mean, it will. I think it will.
Yeah.
but yeah. So
to me, he makes Miles Turner expendable. Like I know this conversation's about Siakam, but like a Jalen Smith Siakam front court moves me a lot more than a Smith Turner front court does.
I agree with you because I think that Turner hasn't had the defensive impact that I think that they hoped that Miles Turner would be able to be like a one-man defense where it's like, yeah, sorry, Miles, we put a bunch of like terrible defensive players around you, but like, can you just make us a solid defense by yourself? And he's just like, nah, I can't. I'm not that good. So I think that's what they were hoping, and we haven't really seen it happen. So yeah, I think that's a valid point because I do like Siakam playing at the 5. I like it a lot better when he's at the 5 and when he plays with Obi, when he plays with Jalen Smith. Like to me, and we talked about this the other day, they had Obi Toppin playing at the 3 the other day, which was crazy. But there was a big lineup. They were not getting killed on the boards, and the defense was able to hold its own with those 3 tall players out there. So I think I think that's an interesting point. If they were to move off of Turner and have, you know, a combination of Siakam and Smith be like their bigs, I think that would be really interesting, but I doubt that they're going to do it. Miles has played so well offensively. He shot tremendously well. I think, you know, probably, he's shooting 33%. That's really interesting. So yeah, I feel like if Pascal he's shooting 55% from the mid range. So he has shot tremendously well from the mid range. I think if Pascal was more replacing Turner and kind of they were doing it that way, that would be a lot more interesting to me. But I guess we'll see what direction they're going to go in, and I'm sure they're going to use whenever Halliburton comes back as data to decide, you know, including the playoffs, to decide what they're going to do next. So they have some directions they could go in. Maybe I'm throwing in the towel on them a little too early.
I just want to say I'm super happy that you brought up the playoffs, you know, because there are a lot of people who actually think that the reason Siakam's going to help is because the rest of what the Pacers are doing isn't sustainable. And so I'd love to hear you talk about that a little bit because, you know, it sounds like to me you're like, oh, actually the Pacers are going to be able to maintain like this pace and this great high efficiency offense with Halliburton basically just carrying the mantle. And Siakam's going to be the one maybe bringing that ceiling down when it comes to playoffs. And I've actually seen a lot of people say, oh, well, there's no way the Pacers can keep this up. They won't move this fast. They won't score at this rate. And when things slow down, having a secondary option like Siakam, having somebody who can work not interchangeably, but connectively with Halliburton in those moments, having 2 threats could bring some extra value. Do you just think there's no merit to that and that's silly, or
I don't think
what are
there's
your
no
thoughts?
merit to that. No, I think there's some merit to parts of it. So I definitely I want to be clear. I don't think, and I know it sounded this way, so I get why you interpreted it like that. I don't think Siakam brings their playoff ceiling down necessarily. That's not really what I'm saying. I think it's a clunky fit, and it's a situation where they have now guys, like more guys who are more valuable, who aren't playing as much, and so who aren't able to impact the game as much as they would have otherwise. So now I just think they need pieces that fit a little better. And like you suggested, if they were to move off of Miles Turner, that would make a lot more sense to me. And get somebody else, maybe somebody better at a guard position or at the three, even though Aaron Nesmith has been incredible lately, by the way. But what I would say is, I'd ask you a question. So, like, how do you slow a team down? Like, how do you slow a team down? Like, if the team is getting the ball out of the basket, inbounding it, and running up the court, how are you forcing them to slow down? I've never really understood this idea where, like, you get in the playoffs and then everything slows down. It's almost like all teams agree when they get to the playoffs, like, hey guys, we're gonna take it about at 90% speed here. We're in the playoffs now. We're not fucking around. This is not the regular season. We're gonna chill the fuck out. We're going to slow down. Everybody slow down. We all agree. Like, how do you slow them down? They're taking the ball out of the basket, throwing it to the guy who's inbounding it, and that guy immediately throws it back to Halliburton, and they run. Like, how are you slowing them down? I'm just not understanding that part of it.
I think the implication is that in the playoffs, rotations get shorter. So it's just not as sustainable to play that style because if the Pacers are going to try to maintain that level of pace with a 10-man rotation or the 9-man rotation they've been using, they're giving more minutes to players who probably shouldn't be playing in playoff games, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, and that's another reason why, like, I love some of the experimentation that the Pacers have been doing, because I think that's an open question. Like, it's an open question to me. Like, if I'm running at you at full speed for 48 minutes of the game, maybe the players that I'm playing aren't as good as the players that you're playing, but you're playing your guys 42 minutes and my guys are fresh and running full speed, and we're playing the same way. We're spaced out. We're firing up threes all game. Like, we're playing man-to-man defense so that we can get better position ourselves for transition offense. Like, good luck guarding that with your guys playing 42 minutes across a 7-game series. Like, and I'm not saying it's going to work. I'm not saying, yes, this would be better. I'm saying I would love to see it tried. I would love to see, hey, we're not cutting down our rotation. No, we're not going to a 7-man, 8-man rotation. We're playing 10 guys and we're playing full speed the whole time. Keep up. Like, I would want to see that. So, and I don't think they're going to go more traditional. And that's a little bit like what's disappointing about, like, kind of not, I want to say, ending the Pacers experiment, to me, is like kind of how I'm seeing it.
Well, it's still, I mean, they replaced Bruce Brown with Pascal Siakam. So, like, they still can play. They still can play at that pace.
You're right.
It's not like Siakam is, like, he loves getting in transition too. I'm sure he's benefiting off of Halliburton pushing and pushing and pushing.
You're right.
They can still do that. And to your point, we saw it. I'm not going to say it worked because they lost in round one. But to me, one of the coolest quotes of last year's playoffs was before the playoffs started, when Mike Brown was asked what they were going to do in Sacramento once the game slowed down. And Mike Brown said, "What do you mean? We're actually going to play faster. Like, we're going to try and run more and shoot more." And look, they came up short in that game 7 against Golden State. Steph Curry scored 50 points, but Sacramento looked really good in that series, and they very easily could have won. And Golden State was a good team, good team with a great player in Steph Curry, and Sacramento took them to 7. I don't think that proved that style didn't work in the playoffs. Like, I think the Kings will try to do it again if they make the playoffs this year. And I think, to your point, the Pacers are going to try to do it. I think Rick Carlisle will have the same answer. He'll say, "We're going to play faster." And that makes me feel not stronger, but that doesn't move me off of my original point. I don't see Siakam as someone who's going to change that fundamentally.